Hello everyone, this is Showtime 112. Both India and Pakistan formed their respective air forces almost as soon as they gained independence in 1947. Their initial equipment was allocated by dividing up the assets of the existing Royal Indian Air Force, and it included aircraft such as Hawker Tempest Mark II fighters, Dakota transport aircraft, and trainers such as the Harvard and Tiger Moth. The first indo-pakistani conflict of 1947-1948 saw only limited use of air power, and soon after, the subcontinent entered the jet age. India was the first to introduce jet fighters, acquiring British de Havilland Vampires in 1948. In 1957, India boosted its offensive capability by adding English electric Canberras to the inventory. 65 airframes were initially ordered, and in September of that year, the first squadron began operating the aircraft. The Canberra was the first British jet bomber, a design whose roots trace back to 1944, when the Air Ministry issued a requirement for a fast bomber to replace the famous Mosquito. This highly successful aircraft entered service in 1951 and was exported to 15 countries, even being produced under license in the United States as the Martin B-57. It saw combat in the 1956 Suez Crisis, the Vietnam War, the Indo-Pakistani Wars, the Falkland War, and several African conflicts. It was also very effectively used as a reconnaissance platform. One of the main reasons for the Canberra's success was its relatively high speed and operational ceiling, which allowed it to evade many early jet interceptors. Pakistan's first combat jet was the Supermarine Attacker, acquired in 1951. This British fighter had originally been developed for the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm, but like many other early jet aircraft, it very quickly became obsolete. Even though it gave Pakistan valuable experience in operating jets, it became clear by 1952 that a more capable aircraft was needed. Pakistan began looking at alternatives, with most of the interest focused on American designs. Between the F-94C and the F-86, the latter was chosen because it had already proven itself in the Korean War both as a fighter and as a fighter bomber. A competing British proposal, the Supermarine Swift, was turned down. The first 30 F-86 Sabres arrived in July 1956, with the remaining portion of the 120 aircraft order delivered by March 1958. After the first conflict ended in 1948, there were occasional skirmishes along the ceasefire line in Kashmir, but air power was generally not involved. Both sides realized that using combat aircraft could quickly escalate the situation into open war. Nevertheless, each side occasionally flew limited electronic and photo reconnaissance missions to keep track of the other. One such mission led directly to an interception and to shots being fired in anger. On 10 April 1959, an Indian Air Force Canberra PR.7 of No. 106 Squadron was flying a sortie classified by the Indian Air Force as a weather reconnaissance mission. As the flight progressed, the aircraft strayed into Pakistani airspace. The plane was piloted by squadron leader Jagdish Chandra Sengupta, with Flight Lieutenant Satendra Nath Rampal as navigator. Being a navigator in the Canberra was a rather thankless job because only the pilot had an ejection seat. The navigator sat at a small table deep inside the fuselage, and in an emergency he had to unbuckle himself, escape through a hatch, and then manually deploy his parachute. That day was a public holiday in Pakistan, and most Air Force stations were running with skeleton crews. Peshawar Air Base had 2 Sabres on alert duty, manned by 2 young flight lieutenants, Naseer and Muhammad Yunis. Early in the morning, an order to scramble was received after a Type 15 radar located at Wagowal near Sargodha detected an incoming bogey. The Sabre pair, led by Naseer climbed at maximum rate and guided by air control spotted the double vapor trail while at around 20,000 feet. They initially suspected it was two hunters and continued climbing. After reaching 41,000 feet, they identified the aircraft as a Canberra, flying at roughly 50,000 feet and heading north. The Sabre leader requested permission to open fire and received it after the young ground controller consulted his superior officer. The altitude the Canberra was flying at was about as high as the Sabres could hope to reach. Flight Lieutenant Butt tried to bring it down by combining steep climbs with bursts of gunfire, followed by stalling and diving to regain energy. He repeated this several times, but it seemed the Canberra crew was still unaware of the danger. His wingman, Flight Lieutenant Yunis, remembered his training days in the United Kingdom. He knew that a Canberra would lose a lot of altitude when turning tightly, so he headed to the right in an attempt to cut off the aircraft's escape route toward India. Yunis later recalled seeing his leaders still too far away from the target when the Canberra pilot turned right, and perhaps spotting him, quickly reversed direction. The Indian pilot then tightened his stern, possibly after catching sight of Flight Lieutenant Butt, which gave Yunis the chance to close in. The Pakistani pilot opened fire and quickly saw hits on the Canberra's right engine. He then aimed at the left engine and walked his fire back toward the center. His machine guns eventually stopped firing due to overheating. Around 1,200 rounds were fired by the Sabre wingman, and the Canberra went into a spiral dive. Fortunately, both Indian crew members managed to abandon the doomed aircraft, even though squadron leader Sengupta fractured both of his legs during ejection. Both men landed near the Pakistani town of Rampal, where they were captured, but released just 4 days later. Flight Lieutenant Yunis was later decorated with the Sitara-e-Jurat. He went on to rise to the rank of Air Vice Marshal and eventually retired in 1990. This was not the first time an Indian aircraft had strayed into Pakistani airspace, but it was the first one to be shot down, marking the Pakistan Air Force's first aerial victory. After this incident, tensions eased, and the air forces of the two countries did not open fire on each other again until 1965. Thank you for your time and keep watching Showtime 112.